German Defense Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer has ordered the partial dissolution of Germany's elite KSK commandos following reports of right-wing extremism in their ranks. Reports say the unit, which specializes in anti-terror and rescue operations, may face a major reorganization and up to 70 of its 1,400 personnel would be cut. Military investigators announced this year that they suspected 20 KSK personnel of holding extreme right attitudes. Media reports quote the defense minister as saying the unit has a toxic leadership culture and cannot continue to exist in its present form. For more on this, let's bring in our political correspondent, Simon Young. Simon, a toxic leadership culture within Germany's elite commando. How serious is this?
Well, I think it is pretty serious. The German defense minister has just been speaking about this. She says most of Germany's soldiers and service personnel are fully committed to, the German constitution and democracy. But there have been a growing number of worrying cases of people with right-wing, far-right views cropping up across the military in isolated cases, and particularly in this KSK Special Forces unit. So that's why the defence minister now is saying, well, we've had an investigation and we're going to take drastic action, as you mentioned there, suspending special forces missions and ending aspects of what this particular unit has been doing, because they say they want to really get on top of the problem of right-wing sympathies within Germany's military.
Simon, stay with us because this is an elite commando unit we are talking about, but the Bundeswehr in general has been under criticism for right-wing extremism. Our reporters have talked to a former soldier. Let's have a look.
He enlisted in the Bundeswehr in 2015. Then 18 years old, he was proud to serve and motivated. But shortly after the 3-month basic training, he tells us, his view of his comrades in arms changed. Someone made a joke about Jews. It was about long noses, things like that. Then someone else said, "What's that, mate? You're saying there are still Jews?" I thought we'd eradicated them all. We'll have to have another go at that. Another time, one of the guys was telling us how he and his brother forced some refugees out of a lake where he lived and went after them with sticks. He was really proud of it. I butted in and said, "You didn't really say that or do that, did you?"
Ich habe mich da eingemischt und habe gesagt, das hast du doch jetzt nicht wirklich so gesagt oder so gemacht.
Anti-Semitic, racist and right-wing extremist remarks were tolerated, or at least ignored, the former soldier says. Criticism from new recruits was not welcomed, so he remained silent. You're under massive pressure to fit in with the others, not to stand out. If you do, you get thrown out. That's what the system is like.
Das heißt, es ist auch gar kein Einzelfall. Mir ist halt aufgefallen, das System hintersteckt.
A hierarchical system of ignoring sentiments and active silencing of criticism in the ranks. That is also what Florian Pfaff, a retired major, experienced. When they know from personal experience that their superiors make them break the law and cover up crimes, when they're forced into doing these things, then, of course, they conclude that these are not isolated cases, that it's coming from the highest levels and also reaches into the realm of politics. Germany's opposition Green Party has been tackling the issue for years. It's a constant problem that I've been trying to tackle on the Parliamentary Defence Committee. Servicemen and women complain that they can't speak out because it would damage their career. We've seen a string of whistleblowers exposing right-wing extremism in the army. In the end, they've been forced to leave. The issue has repeatedly made headlines. In recent years, numerous cases of right-wing extremists in the ranks have come to light. Critics say the problem has not yet been recognised as structural, and that up to now, no appropriate measures have been taken. The co-ruling Social Democrats defend past reforms. 3 years ago, we brought in structural reforms to help root out extremism. At the moment, there's still a backlog of cases. Our awareness of the problem is not new. It's always been there. Confronted with the experiences of the former soldier, Germany's defence ministry said it condemned anti-Semitic, xenophobic and extremist behaviour of any kind by members of the army. The defence minister said anyone who remains silent is part of the problem and is complicit. The ministry says it will now take steps to tackle the issue. The former soldier eventually turned his back on the Bundeswehr. Now he hopes that things will finally change. Despite the bad experiences, he has a clear vision for the German army. An open and honest army that looks after soldiers who speak out when things are not right. An army that doesn't just get rid of soldiers who break the mould. If that happens, he could even imagine going back into the army one day.
Simon Young is still with us. Simon, the German defense minister just held a press conference. How exactly does she want to tackle the issue of right-wing extremism within the Bundeswehr?
Well, one of the things I mentioned is she's going to send a signal to the KSK, this elite force in particular, that things have to change and they have to change soon. That signal is going to involve ending missions and pulling out of current missions and planned missions. There seem to be only about 30 KSK personnel at the moment in the field in Afghanistan, where they're in a training mission. That will continue, it seems, but other field exercises and training missions will not go ahead. They're also going to disband one of the companies within the KSK, which has had particular problems, also bringing training within the KSK under the authority of central military control. So a real tightening, and the German defence minister said if there isn't an improvement in rooting out right-wing extremism by the end of October, then further consequences may have to be faced.
Simon Young, thank you very much for that.
Let's get more now. We are joined by Thomas Wiegold. He is a journalist and an author with a focus on the German Bundeswehr. Thank you so much for joining us. We've just heard it there, a toxic leadership culture within Germany's elite commando. How serious is it?
I think it's pretty serious. You mentioned already investigators from the Counterintelligence unit of the army are investigating this unit for at least 2 or 3 years, which is a major blow to the armed forces in itself. Well, actually, the plans which will be formally announced today include the disbanding of a part of this elite unit, not the unit as a whole. And this means that the minister and the ministry is trying to get rid of those toxic parts in this unit without disbanding the unit as a whole, without destroying the capabilities they need.
Let's talk a little bit more about what's been going on in this unit, because we've been seeing a couple incidents in recent years, including KSK members allegedly throwing pig heads and performing the Nazi salute at a party. On another occasion, we have reports of large amounts of ammunition and explosives disappearing. How is this possible?
Well, that's a question which hasn't been really answered. I think the major point was in mid-May when police searched the house of a sergeant major of this unit, and they found weapons, they found ammunition, they found explosives, and most of it came out of stocks of the Bundeswehr, which means that right-wing extremists had been able to put ammunition and explosive on the side, obviously preparing for some kind of right-wing extremist action. And that's a major concern. You have elite commandos trained in weapons, trained in ammunition, and they have for their personal use some explosives on the side. That's something no army can tolerate.
And let's not forget, you said it there, these are elite commandos, the best of the best. What does this tell you then more broadly about the general state of the Bundeswehr? And do you really think that, these restructurings that we've heard announced can really tackle the issue of right-wing extremism there?
Well, that remains to be seen. We also have to see that the head of the counterintelligence unit this Monday, for the first time, used the term right-wing networks in the armed forces. So far, this was always considered officially, at least, as single cases. Now, the counterintelligence unit, the ministry, is regarding this as a network issue. So they have to find those networks. They have to identify right-wing extremists. This is in the active forces as well as with reservists. There also had been reports, and the number of right-wing cases, which is under investigation, has risen to 600 in recent months. Now, on the other hand, this is a 180,000-man army, which means it's still a minor number, but still reason for concern.
Thomas Weigold, journalist, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective.
My pleasure.